there's been a lot going on in the land of Elon, and Elon is a very interesting person, obviously. He has gotten where he has gotten through some very unusual personal characteristics. But in any case, in recent weeks, he has become obviously and publicly interested in the state of Twitter and potentially doing something about it. So he initially took a substantial stake, became its largest shareholder, was apparently headed to the board, decided not to get on the board, which was interesting. There was a reason for that. I'm not sure he has said this exactly, but there was a limit to how much Twitter ownership he could have and be on the board. And so he decided not to join the board, and then announced a plan to effectively acquire Twitter by buying up stock, $43 billion worth or something like this. In any case, the reaction to this was an all-out freak-out by many, many people, and Twitter itself responded by announcing what's called a poison pill strategy. And the poison pill, so taken from the idea of somebody who doesn't want to be captured, would rather die than be captured, who might take a poison pill so that they can't be tortured and give up information. The poison pill is a business strategy. They started in the 80s. There are several different flavors, but in this case, basically, it's a plan in which the acquisition of stock above some threshold will trigger Twitter to issue to stockholders, except the one in the triggering position, stock at a greatly discounted price, thereby driving up the cost to acquire it. And this is a very effective strategy to prevent an acquisition. I will point out, I don't know if you will remember this, but our good friend Mike Brown, former CEO of the NASDAQ and CFO of Microsoft, is an accountant.
In Microsoft's early days.
Yeah, in Microsoft's early days. He is an accountant by training, and he once told us a story of an accounting ploy used to prevent acquisitions. Went by a very different name, which I remember to this day, which is a prickle ball. And the idea was a prickle ball was a financial structure that would cause the swallowing corporation to gag and cough up the corporation that had been acquired.
Somewhat slimier, but otherwise intact.
Yeah, otherwise intact, which actually reminds me a little bit of your poison frogs that you studied, which also on occasion would be swallowed by something that would then think better of it and cough them up, and they would hop away.
I saw this precisely once. A boa took in a poison frog and chewed on it for a while and finally spit it back out, and she went on to become a successful mother. The frog did. Yeah,
which is an amazing, it's amazing to have seen that even once.
Yeah, extraordinary.
Yeah, especially if you can track the animal and know that, in fact, it goes on to reproduce, thereby telling a rather complete evolutionary story.
Luckily for me, I had already tattooed this particular frog, so I did not have to hassle it right then.
Yes, you heard her correctly. She tattooed the frog.
Yes, yes.
Yep. These were not gorgeous tattoos.
I never got, I mean, they're small. Frogs only have two layers of skin to R3, so you have to be really careful not to go that deep. And I didn't get to like mom with a heart or anything. They were alphanumeric codes, A1, B2, C3, etc.
Yeah. Well, in any case, there's a lot we could.
I don't know how we got there. Prickleball.
Well, you know, this is why these people tune in, because there's often a hidden evolutionary connection, and well,
and tattooing frogs is the hidden evolutionary connection.
Yes, to this counter hostile takeover strategy. Anyway, there are aspects. So as I said before, I think there are multiple different kinds of poison pills. The poison pill that Twitter deployed was this particular, I think it's the most standard poison pill that is typically utilized. I don't know a ton about it, even though I'm you know that I'm actually quite the investor.
The investor?
Yeah, I'm a very good investor born into the wrong portfolio. That's pretty much what I've concluded.
Is that right?
Yes.
So you've invested in?
Well, not the right stuff, but I would natively invest in the right stuff is kind of the implication.
I see.
Yeah.
I don't think I know what we're talking about.
No. I don't know. I was just off in a cul-de-sac. But the point is, or the point that I wanted to make about this, is that the whole question about why Elon would acquire Twitter, why he would seek to acquire it. He made very clear as he ran his poll on Twitter about whether or not we users felt that speech rights were properly protected there. And in comments since, he's made it quite clear that his purpose isn't exactly about the financial potential of this investment, that he is actually concerned about what is happening on Twitter that affects what we do, what is clearly our new public square, which is a really interesting phenomenon. He, the wealthiest person on earth at the moment, is in a position actually to move pieces on the chessboard of planet Earth that others simply couldn't. I wanted to connect it, though, to a concept that we have talked about here on DarkHorse many times. The tagline is "Zero is a special number." And what we have meant by zero is a special number is that there are lots of places where you, in order to engage in a certain strategy, need exactly zero alternatives to be present. So the idea is, if there was a American university, for example, that had declared itself immune to wokeness and intent on simply continuing the practice of teaching people to think scientifically, logically, reasonably, teaching them about important facts of history rather than indoctrinating them into the belief that all white people are racist, or that the reason that men outcompete women athletically has to do with the patriarchy or something like this. If a university declared itself interested in teaching in the way universities used to attempt to teach, it would obviously be the place everybody who wanted their children educated would send them. And so the point is, that's the obvious strategy. Why aren't there any? And the answer is, there have to be none. If one university declared that strategy and suddenly it was the new Harvard because everybody who had the ability to choose where to go would go there, so they would not suffer the cost of paying for their own indoctrination, but would actually enhance their minds, then of course that strategy would spread and university after university would pick up this strategy. So there have to be zero, because if there was one, it would win, right?
It does raise the question of what kinds of mechanisms are involved to keep it at zero. And I'm thinking within the university question, and we will come back to exactly this question in our next couple of episodes, actually. But there are some new initiatives in higher ed that look promising. And until, I don't know, 3-5 years ago, the University of Chicago seemed to be holding strong and saying, we have the Chicago principles and we are not going to succumb to the crazy, basically. But they stopped.
Right.
So why did they? Given that it seems like just at a fiscal level, the existing, in this case, elite university that said, not us, come to here if you don't want any of that, would just be drawing so many students that they'd suddenly have resolved any lingering economic issues that they have.
Right. So we can't, we can talk a little bit about all that we've seen that has pressured people into embracing idiotic policies at their university or wherever else. But the basic point is, there is so much at stake, right, for the woke revolution. And the woke revolution really is about certain people making a move, right? Mm-hmm. They want to change where they are, and they may be justified in wanting to change where they are in civilization's hierarchy, but they're doing it by a legitimate means. And the point is, there's so much at stake for them in keeping the number of universities that you can send your kid to at zero, that the point is, you should expect them to spend an ungodly amount of effort or resources to intimidate anybody who attempts to evade this puzzle and create the first, to put down a flag that declares independence from the movement. So Indeed. The point is, zero is a special number because zero has to be the number. If there was a newspaper that was reporting reality, right, we'd all subscribe, right? So there can't be a newspaper that reports reality. They all have to suffer because zero is a special number. The corollary here, though, the reason that I think this is important in the current question about what Elon is up to and where we are, is that zero is a special number, and the implication of zero as a special number is that one is an equally special number. So this is a bid to get us a platform that works. Now, is it possible that Elon is not being straightforward and he has some other reason to want us to think that that's what he's doing? I guess. But he has been very clear, and I don't see any real reason to doubt him. He's a guy who's made enough resource and he's clearly having fun doing things that a person might choose to want to do, choose to want to be remembered for, and this sort of fits with that ethos.
I think that's part of what angers people, frankly, that he's having fun at it.
Well, and I think it also scares them, because one of the things that works in favor of those who wish to hold the number of functional entities to zero is that in general, people who get control of one of these things are subject to the same incentives as everybody else. And so it doesn't mean that anybody's lost control. But in the case of somebody like Elon, who can throw, a vast sum at the problem and still not compromise his ability to do what he wants in the world, that's a frightening prospect, especially if what he wants to do is protect free speech rights. Because think about all of the stuff. I mean, given the last 2 years have been a marvelous example of the importance of Twitter not being a free space, right? All of the things that we have false consensus on, right, become very different if suddenly, you can speak openly on Twitter and nothing bad happens to you.
Yep. Let me actually just point out that we're not going to show the video, but there's a video from Morning Joe this week, and you can show my screen briefly if you want here, in which the hosts are talking about the bid, and they are not pleased. And again, I'm not going to play this through, but one of the quotes, the salient quote from in here is the female host, whose name I've forgotten, says, "Elon could actually control what people think. That's our job."
God. Do they hear themselves?
Well, probably not. There's going to be a lot of arm waving, I'm sure, to explain this away. But this is precisely the problem, right? When you reveal the man behind the curtain and you see that they're doing exactly the thing that they're claiming they're afraid that someone else is going to do, and it seems more likely, actually, that indeed that was a reveal of how many in the mainstream media view themselves. We are here to tell you what to think because you plebes are not smart enough to understand yourselves. And if someone else comes along and says, I actually am interested in not letting you do that, it's as if the only possible reason they can imagine for someone to behave this way is with the same ill intentions that they have.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what we think we are looking at here, I mean, let's put it this way. Because we don't know what he's actually up to, this could be very negative, right? In other words, there may be as bad as Twitter is, maybe it could be worse. On the other hand, it's hard to imagine how it could be, right? And when I say worse, I don't just mean unpleasant and nasty and slanted and all of those things. I mean actually dangerous. And, Elon has alluded to this, but think about the things that have been contentious on Twitter. I mean, for one, it occurs to me right now, Articles of Unity, right? Articles of Unity was important, potentially, even if it didn't stand an important chance of succeeding in its objective. The point was, it was about, hey, we've got a fundamental problem. We've got two broken political parties, and they have frozen everyone out. We've got a duopoly that we need to deal with, and this is becoming more lethal by the decade.
And grassroots works, and Unity was very grassroots, in large part by spreading via social networks until yesterday, effectively, through actual social networks, not virtual social networks, such that people became aware that there were other people who were interested in solving a problem that maybe they had a little inkling of but couldn't quite put their finger on, or they knew very well that there was a problem but didn't think that anyone else saw it like them. So this is in part, the tamping down of projects like Unity. The importance of that, as you just said, is not necessarily in but we could have won. Almost no one expected that there was a real chance in that first iteration of, Unity going to the White House. It would have been lovely, but that much of what it was doing was revealing to as many people as possible, we are out here. There are people who are thinking carefully and consciously and conscientiously and morally and compassionately and rigorously and logically about the same issues that all of you care about. And if you feel like you haven't seen anyone on the mainstream media about whom you can say that in forever, well, you're right. And here we are.
And in the context of the last election, the ability to say that was all the more important, because the critical thing, at the point that you have two parties who nominate people as old as Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the question is, well, why would a party not be able to nominate somebody who is simply less likely to be mentally compromised by age? Are there no young people as competent as those two? That seems really unlikely. And in fact, if you look deeper, you look at highly competent people who couldn't get through the primaries, because that is, after all, how the duopoly maintains control for their real constituents, who are the corruptors of the system. And so the ability to simply have a place where you can speak the obvious, where you can say, look, we have a corruption problem. This isn't new. Yes, you're being told you have no choice but to vote for Joe Biden because Donald Trump is that much of an existential threat to humanity, but you were also told that about Mitt Romney, and now you love him. So, you know, the ability to say that is important. If Elon were to succeed in saving one platform, then effectively he saves social media, because once there is one platform in which you can say real things, how do the other platforms continue their campaign of suppression, right? Because the fact is, if you can't say real things on Facebook and you can on Twitter, then people are going to flood to Twitter, because in general, this is about people wanting to hear things, and the way to prevent them from hearing them is to stamp them out, so they're just not sayable.